They moved like soldiers, Corvus thought, as he watched the ex-prisoners spreading out across the Ferrocrete. A few years ago they had been gangsters and philosophers, thieves and agitators. Now they were his army, well-drilled and highly motivated. He knew much of the credit was his, but in turn he owed a lot to whoever had given him the gifts he possessed. People listened to him without doubt, and he had an innate understanding of fighting. To direct an attack or devise a strategy came as naturally to Corvus as breathing. Some of the men were pointing upwards and shouting. A craft appeared beyond the field barrier, twin trails of plasma bright against the dark sky. As it descended through the barrier high above, Corvus saw that it was shaped like a great mechanical bird of prey, golden in color, with angled wings that stretched back like those of a diving hawk. It hovered for a moment and plasma engines dimmed as the pilot switched to anti-gravitic impellers to land the craft. Falling slowly, the shuttle came to rest at the center of the apron within the inner circle marked there in red paint. Corvus looked through the canopy and was surprised to see that the cockpit was empty. He suddenly felt a hint of suspicion at the seemingly unmanned craft. Perhaps it was loaded with explosives, a desperate act of petty revenge from one of the guild masters. "Ready weapons," Gaffion called out. The men raised an assortment of slug throwers, shotguns and las rifles looted from dead guards and captured weapons lockers. A door opened in the side of the shuttle beneath the right wing, directly opposite Corvus. Light spilled from within as a gangplank extended from the craft with a clang. A shadow appeared in the light, waiting for a moment at the entryway before emerging into view. Whispers spread through the men, of surprise and amazement. Guns quivered in shaking hands, and there were clatters as some of the soldiers dropped their weapons. Seemingly without prompt, the men lowered themselves to the ground, putting aside their weapons and bowing their heads. Some prostrated themselves, whispering fervently. Corvus glanced to Gaffion beside him. The lieutenant was on his knees too. There were tears in his eyes and an expression of joy etched on his slack-lipped face. "So majestic," Gaffion muttered. "What glory! What power!" Confused, Corvus directed his attention to the man descending the landing ramp. He seemed unremarkable. In fact, he seemed so unremarkable that Corvus could not discern a single distinguishing feature about him. He was of average height with dark hair and moderately tanned skin. In build he was neither bulky nor slight, but of normal proportion, slightly larger than the malnourished men who now abased themselves before him. He was dressed in a robe of white linen, free of ornamentation, except for a necklace of gold on which hung a pendant fashioned in the shape of an eagle with outspread wings, a lightning bolt in its claws. The man's eyes were as indistinct as the rest of him, neither blue nor green nor grey nor brown, but a flecked mixture of all. Yet there was something in those eyes that reached into Corvus and touched upon his inner self. There was wisdom and kindness there, and antiquity that was very humbling but also disconcerting. And at the same time as Corvus saw this, he also witnessed the arrival of a demigod, wreathed in golden light and dressed in white finery that burned with its own light. He saw a stern face set with two golden orbs for eyes, piercing in their intensity, searing into the core of his being. The stranger seemed to tower over the kneeling men, borne forwards upon a carpet of undulating flames. It was impossible to reconcile the two images. The supreme, grandiose king of men approached Corvus, but all the while the slight, unimposing man flickered within. Finally, Corvus's mind could fight no longer against the glamour, and he saw the new arrival as his followers did, and was filled by an overwhelming urge to pay obeisance to this stranger. He fought that instinct. He had waged a war, so that his people would not bow before another man. The newcomer's effect on Corvus's men unsettled the rebel leader. He stared with narrowed eyes, unable to discern which image was true and which was illusion, as the stranger paced slowly and confidently across the Ferrocrete. "Who are you?" Corvus demanded. "What have you done to my men?" The stranger looked around at the guerrilla fighters, regarding him with adoration, seeming to Corvus slightly nonplussed at the scene. His blonde hair fell in waves across his shoulders as he turned his head, spilling like fiery liquid. Another wave of majesty swept over Corvus, and again the guerrilla commander had to make a physical effort not to fall to his knees. "An occupational hazard," said the man, returning his attention to Corvus. He fixed the rebel leader with a stare, his eyes now permanently golden, like bottomless wells of light. There was a glow of power beneath his skin, as if the stranger's flesh were embers masked behind thin paper. Corvus experienced a momentary fluttering in his breast and a knot of anxiety in his gut, a fraction of the effect the man was having on his warriors. "I am the Emperor of mankind. I created you." Hearing these words was like a veil lifting from Corvus's eyes. He saw the Emperor as he had seen him before, watching the growing infant through the canopy of an incubator. His face had been distorted by curved plates of glass, but the features were unmistakable. The guerrilla leader had long pondered the face from his earliest memories, wondering to whom it belonged. Now, vague recollections became sharp memory. Corvus recalled the noise and lights and booming voices that had engulfed him, remembered the surge of power and disorientation as unnatural forces had borne him away from the place of his creation. Now he saw and knew for certain the face of his father, the only individual worthy of Corvus's unwavering obedience. He lowered himself to one knee in deference, understanding that the stranger spoke the truth. Here was the master of mankind. "What do you call this place?" the Emperor asked. "It used to be called Lycaeus," Corvus replied. "Now we know it as Deliverance." "A good name," said the Emperor. "Please rise, my son. We have much to talk about." And they did. Corvus withdrew from his men and took the Emperor to his quarters, an old guard station in the mid-levels of the Black Tower. Corvus sought out food and drink for his guest, ashamed at the meager fare he could offer his father. The Emperor waved away his concerns, sitting on the rough bunk that served as a chair for the massive rebel commander.